Welcome to The Explainer. So today we are diving headfirst into the incredibly perilous, high-stakes world of Soviet artists back in the mid-20th century. We're looking at a time when musicians, composers, and performers had to navigate this totally lethal ideological minefield, literally just to create music. I mean, imagine a world where playing the wrong chord or praising the wrong composer could cost you your freedom or even your life.
Right off the bat, I want to ask you a question that honestly sounds like it was ripped straight out of a Cold War spy thriller. Did a lone pianist's letter really kill Joseph Stalin? We're starting with this incredibly cinematic, apocryphal myth of the fearless Russian pianist Maria Yudina. According to the legend, which, by the way, even made its way into the dark comedy film The Death of Stalin, her defiant words supposedly triggered the dictator's fatal cerebral hemorrhage in 1953.
So picture this. According to the story, Stalin heard Yudina play a live radio broadcast of a Mozart piano concerto and demanded a copy. Terrified officials literally woke her up in the middle of the night to record a single, one-off copy just for him. And he loved it so much he awarded her 20,000 rubles. In response, she supposedly sent him this thank you note. Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin, you have betrayed our nation and destroyed its people. I pray for your end and ask the Lord to forgive you, tyrant. She even added that she gave all the money to her church. Now, whether it's entirely true or not, this incredible story perfectly sets the stage for the literal life-or-death stakes these artists faced every single day.
To really grasp how an environment like this even existed, we've got a bit of a roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1. Defying the Soviet dictator, 2. The doctrine of socialist realism, 3. The crime of formalism, 4. Religion in an atheistic state, 5. The machinery of censorship, and finally, 6. The unbreakable artistic spirit. Let's deconstruct these ideological crimes and get right into it.
Section 1. Defying the Soviet dictator, the myth versus the reality.
So we really need to contrast the popular myths of artistic rebellion with the terrifying reality of the Soviet system. That apocryphal story of Yudina's suicidal letter to Stalin? Historians heavily disputed. Shostakovich claimed it happened, sure, but no record was ever found on Stalin's record player, and her friend said she totally would have boasted about it later if it were true. But here's the thing. The core truth is undeniable. Maria Yudina unquestionably pursued a path of incredibly dangerous nonconformity. She was constantly pushing boundaries that could have easily signed her death warrant.
Moving on to Section 2. The doctrine of socialist realism. What the state demanded.
To understand why these artists faced such intense censorship, we absolutely have to talk about exactly what the Stalinist regime expected from its cultural figures. The crucial concept here is socialist realism. This was the state-mandated artistic doctrine. It strictly required works to be highly accessible, rigorously optimistic, and firmly anchored in nationalistic values that supported the Soviet cause. You have to remember, music and art were not viewed as ways to express yourself. Not at all. They were strictly tools for the state. If your music didn't serve the Communist Party, it wasn't just considered bad art, it was considered a literal threat to the government.
The battle lines of Soviet censorship were just incredibly clear-cut. On one side, you have socialist realism, meaning the state wanted upbeat, traditional, optimistic anthems. On the other side, you have formalism. Now, formalism was basically a catch-all term for anything deemed too complex, too Western, or too avant-garde. The regime fiercely punished formalism. They wanted music that the masses could easily hum along to while building a utopian society, right? They absolutely did not want complicated sonic experiments that made people question reality.
Which brings us to Section 3, the crime of formalism, the purge of the avant-garde.
Let's explore how this really broad, super ambiguous label of formalism was weaponized against the greatest musical minds of the era. Andrei Zhdanov's 1948 Resolution on Music aimed this label directly at some heavy hitters. We're talking Sergei Prokofiev, Dmitri Shostakovich, Igor Stravinsky, Bela Bartok, and Aram Khachaturian. I mean, these are some of the most legendary composers in history. But under this sweeping censorship campaign against what the state dubbed rootless cosmopolitanism, their masterpieces were completely condemned. It got so bad that musicologists were forced to avoid even mentioning any Western influences on Russian music. On a personal level, we actually have documented evidence of this. There is a literal denunciation letter against Maria Yudina from the faculty of the Khabarov School of Music in 1963. She was invited there to perform, but she shocked this packed hall by announcing she would only speak, she wouldn't play a single note. She then enthusiastically praised Western composers like Stravinsky and Hindemith, and just completely glossed over Soviet composers. And for that,
She was accused of bourgeois ideology and hit with a widespread concertizing ban across the entire Soviet Union that lasted for 3.5 years.
Section 4. Religion in an atheistic state. Faith as defiance. Let's shift our focus a bit to explore another major crime in the Soviet Union at the time: openly practicing religion. Maria Yudina's uncompromising Orthodox faith came at a massive cost. In an officially atheistic state where religion was violently suppressed, she treated her performances almost like religious sermons, famously wearing this really prominent cross while playing. Because of this, she was dismissed from the Petrograd Conservatory in 1930, accused of being an exponent of religious mysticism. And the state would constantly harass her. They would send in these so-called raids of the Light Brigade to interrogate her about her belief in God, right in front of her own students.
Section 5. The machinery of censorship, the human cost.
Now we have to break down the devastating bureaucratic enforcement methods the state used to crush these non-compliant artists. An artist's downfall escalated with terrifying speed. Step 1, state praise. Step 2, suddenly an accusation of ideological error. Step 3, blacklisted from all work and travel. Step 4, arrest and the gulag. An artist's fate was incredibly capricious. For instance, in February of 1948, Sergei Prokofiev was honored in this huge ceremony at the Kremlin. Literally days later, many of his works were completely banned. You could go from being the toast of the Kremlin to breaking rocks in the frozen Kolyma labor camps in the blink of an eye.
To truly grasp the human cost here, just consider these words from composer Moisey Weinberg. When they finally did lock me up, it came as a relief. I mean, just imagine that for a second. Imagine the level of constant surveillance, the late-night knocks at the door, and the mind-bending paranoia required to make actual imprisonment in Moscow's notorious Butyrka prison feel like an escape. The psychological warfare they endured was just relentless.
And finally, Section 6, the unbreakable artistic spirit, resilience in the shadows. As we wrap up, we want to celebrate the sheer, unbreakable resilience of the artists who somehow kept creating under this thick fog of fear. But first, we have to acknowledge the damage it did. Dmitri Shostakovich confessed, quote, "I am scared to death. From childhood, I have been doing things that I wanted not to do. I am and always will be a whore." It's a heartbreaking quote, and it really underscores the immense psychological toll and the deep self-loathing induced by the regime. Shostakovich survived, yeah, but he carried the incredibly heavy burden of having to continually compromise his art just to stay alive. Yet, despite all of that terror, we have these vivid micro-stories of survival. You have composer Vsevolod Zadoratsky, who served 2 sentences in the brutal gulags, literally writing music on a stack of blank telegram forms because he simply couldn't stop himself from creating. You have Maria Yudina pausing her piano concerts to boldly recite poetry by Boris Pasternak, who was completely banned from publishing at the time. These human struggles prove that looking at the historical data doesn't capture everything. The deep, fundamental urge to create simply could not be entirely stamped out by the state.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and I want to leave you with a provocative question to really chew on. If regimes can silence the artists, blacklist the scores, and ban the poetry, why does the art outlive the dictator? Stalin passed away in 1953, and while his shadow loomed large for a long time, today we are still listening to the brilliant, complex works of Shostakovich and Prokofiev. We still talk about the legendary, defiant performances of Maria Yudina. The censors absolutely tried to destroy them, but the music survived. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive, and I hope this leaves you wanting to go explore the incredible music born from this era of defiance.